Hey, Cowboys Nation, today, we need to unpack something that has been swirling around the internet and social media lately, because it's causing more confusion than clarity. There's been a lot of chatter about Micah Parsons and his supposed praise for Dak Prescott. And if you've been scrolling through headlines without listening carefully, you might have been completely misled. Let's set the record straight, because this is exactly the kind of story where context matters more than the clickbait framing. So, we're going to dive deep into what was actually said, what was actually meant, and why the way it was presented could easily trick fans into thinking something different. First off, the clip in question has been circulating with captions and headlines implying that Parsons put Dak in his top 3 for MVP consideration. On the surface, that sounds like a massive endorsement, right? But here's the kicker: if you actually listen to the audio, it becomes clear that this whole narrative has been distorted. Parsons' comments were largely focused on Jordan Love, the quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. And while Dak was mentioned, it was for literally a few seconds at most. Parsons was highlighting the challenges Love has faced this season, specifically missing significant pieces of his receiving cores, and how he's managed to play at a high level despite those obstacles. The discussion about Dak was fleeting, almost a side note, and definitely not the focus of the praise. It's important to understand exactly what Parsons said. He mentioned that outside of Stafford, there is a quarterback playing outstanding football, and then he also referenced Dak Prescott, acknowledging that he's playing well too. But the central point, the context Parsons kept returning to, was Jordan Love's resilience and performance. Love has had to adapt to losing key receivers, including the early season absence of Cy and then Jaden Reed, and Parsons made it clear that these accomplishments should not go unnoticed. The problem is that the clip has been framed in a way that makes it seem like Dak was the main subject, when in reality, the majority of the praise was directed at someone entirely different. This is why it's so crucial to not just consume media at face value and to question the way headlines and clips are presented, especially when they involve high-profile figures like Dak Prescott. Fans, it's easy to fall for these traps. Social media is filled with platforms that claim to represent Cowboys Nation, but not every post has the genuine perspective of a devoted fan. Some are designed to push narratives or soften the perception of certain players for reasons that have little to do with the Cowboys themselves. This is exactly what happened here. Parsons' comments were used selectively, chopped up, and packaged in a way that suggested he was gushing over Dak Prescott, when in fact he was merely acknowledging him briefly, while focusing on a completely different quarterback. The way this was presented is a perfect example of how sports media can manipulate context to shape fan perceptions, sometimes for PR purposes or to build a particular storyline. Let's talk about why this matters. When a player leaves a team under less than ideal circumstances, there's often an attempt to reshape the narrative. In this case, the way the clip was posted seems to serve that purpose. The platform that shared it might have had good intentions or might have been influenced by outside factors, but the result is the same. Fans are being nudged to feel nostalgic or sympathetic for someone who is no longer part of the organization. It's like looking back at an ex and romanticizing moments without acknowledging the reasons things ended the way they did. Dak Prescott, the Cowboys, and the fanbase deserve clarity, not misleading packaging of statements that are meant to evoke emotion rather than convey accurate information. What's also worth noting is the frustration this causes among real fans. There's a difference between supporting your team and being drawn into a narrative that doesn't reflect reality. Parsons' original intent was to praise a quarterback who faced adversity, not to reignite debates about Dak Prescott or to suggest that he should be celebrated in the same way. The way this content was framed can easily lead casual viewers to believe that Dak was being highlighted as the MVP frontrunner in this discussion, which simply isn't true. Paying attention to the details, the names mentioned, the context of the challenges, and the flow of the conversation is key to understanding the truth behind what's being said. It's also a reminder about how quickly misinformation can spread in sports media. Clips get shared, captions get rewritten, and suddenly, fans are debating something that is mostly a construct of how a post was edited rather than the reality of the player's performance. Jordan Love has had a season where he's overcome significant obstacles, and Parsons' comments were a reflection of that journey. Dak's contributions, while valuable, were not the focus here. Yet, by cutting the clip, highlighting Dak's name in the caption, and ignoring the bulk of the context, it becomes very easy for casual followers to misinterpret what was actually said. This is a classic example of context being everything in sports narratives, and why critical listening is just as important as watching the game, beyond the specifics of the clip. This situation also speaks to fan culture and how narratives are consumed and spread. Cowboys Nation is incredibly passionate, and rightly so. Fans want to celebrate their heroes, defend their players, and analyze every move. But there's a line between thoughtful discussion and being misled by selective editing or intentional framing. Understanding that line is part of being a smart, informed fan. In this case, the focus should be on recognizing the real achievements of players like Jordan Love and Dak Prescott individually, rather than getting caught up in a manufactured debate designed to create drama or sentimentality. Now, here's another angle to consider. Platforms and commentators sometimes have motivations that aren't immediately obvious. In this scenario, there's a clear effort to generate engagement, provoke debate, and perhaps even protect reputations by presenting Parsons' remarks as if he were overwhelmingly praising Dak Prescott. The clip creates controversy and discussion, which in turn drives attention to the platform sharing it. It's a strategy that works, but it's not about accurate reporting. It's about perception management. Fans need to be aware of this, because being swayed by cleverly packaged content can distort how we view players, their contributions, and the overall dynamics within the league. Finally, let's acknowledge the emotional element. Fans get invested, and it's natural to feel nostalgic or protective over players who have made an impact on the team. But we have to distinguish between sentiment and fact. Dak Prescott has had an incredible career with the Cowboys, no doubt about that. But this clip doesn't reflect anything beyond a brief acknowledgement of his performance. The attention should be on giving credit where it's truly due. Jordan Love's perseverance this season, and not being manipulated into thinking there's a deeper endorsement for Dak Prescott than actually exists. Recognizing that distinction is essential to maintaining perspective as a fan and engaging with sports media critically. Now that we've cleared up the misconceptions around Parsons' comments, let's dig even deeper into why this matters for Cowboys Nation and how we approach the narrative surrounding our team. One of the biggest challenges in following football today is sifting through the noise. There are clips, captions, and social media posts that look official, sound convincing, and even appear on platforms you trust, but when you actually pay attention to the details, you realize the story being sold isn't always the story that was told. This situation is a perfect example. Fans are being pushed toward an emotional response rather than a rational understanding of the facts. When we let emotions drive our perception, it's easy to get caught up in debates that are, in reality, built on half-truths and misrepresented statements. Cowboys Nation deserves better than that. Think about what this means for the way we view players and their legacies. Dak Prescott has had an outstanding career and continues to be a central figure for the Cowboys. But that doesn't mean every clip that mentions him is about him in the way you might assume. Understanding context is everything. Parsons' words weren't an attempt to elevate Dak above other quarterbacks or to create a narrative that he should be considered the league's most valuable player. His focus was entirely on another quarterback's perseverance and skill in a challenging situation. When media outlets or platforms package content differently, it can distort reality. And that's exactly what happened here. Fans need to approach every piece of content with a critical ear and a willingness to dig into what was really said rather than what the headline suggests. The lesson here extends beyond this specific clip. In the age of social media, highlights, and short-form content, selective editing can create misleading impressions in seconds. A few words taken out of context can create a completely different story. That's why it's so important for fans to not just watch, but to actively listen, to question, and to recognize the difference between actual praise, casual acknowledgement, and manufactured sentiment. Parsons' statement about Dak was acknowledgement at best, not a celebration or a campaign-style endorsement. Yet, the way it was presented made it seem like there was something more substantial, and that's where fans often get tripped up. Another point worth emphasizing is the role of platforms in shaping these narratives. Not all accounts or channels that appear to represent Cowboys Nation have the same priorities or the same loyalty to the fan base. Some may be more focused on engagement, controversy, or softening the perception of certain players or situations. This is why it's so critical to differentiate between commentary that comes from genuine fandom versus commentary that is influenced by PR objectives or external relationships. When a platform has a history of close connections to particular players or insiders, it's even more essential to approach their content with a careful and discerning mindset. In this instance, the way Parsons' remarks were framed clearly served a purpose beyond simply informing fans. It was about managing perception, creating conversation, and perhaps even protecting reputations that had little to do with the Cowboys' current team. This brings us to a broader reflection on fan loyalty and perspective. Cowboys Nation is passionate, knowledgeable, and deeply invested in every aspect of the team. That passion is a strength, but it can also be exploited if we're not careful. We can't let selective edits, misleading captions, or emotionally driven presentations manipulate our views of players or distract us from the reality of their contributions. Dak Prescott remains a cornerstone of this franchise, but his legacy and his impact should be measured by his performance on the field, the leadership he provides, and his commitment to the team, not by how clips are framed or edited online. Recognizing this helps fans stay grounded and appreciate players for their actual achievements, rather than imagined narratives. We also need to consider how this affects discussions among fans themselves. Misleading content can lead to unnecessary debates, false comparisons, and divisive arguments that distract from the real story. When fans believe a player is being unfairly praised or overlooked based on misrepresented clips, it can create tension and confusion within the community. By taking a step back and analyzing the source, the context, and the full content of statements, we equip ourselves with the tools to have meaningful conversations rather than reacting emotionally to partially presented information. In this case, the focus should have remained on Jordan Love's performance and perseverance, not on creating a false narrative around Dak Prescott's recognition. It's also worth pointing out the broader pattern in sports media of amplifying narratives for engagement. Controversy drives clicks, views, and comments, and in the process, the nuance of the actual story is often lost. Selective editing, strategic captions, and social media framing can give fans a perception that doesn't match reality. For Cowboys Nation, being aware of these tactics is critical. Understanding that a short clip or a headline might not tell the full story empowers fans to think critically and resist being swept up by manufactured narratives. Parsons' brief acknowledgement of Dak was framed to evoke a reaction that wasn't truly reflective of his intended message. Recognizing that difference is part of being a savvy fan. Moreover, this situation highlights the importance of focusing on what truly matters: performance, commitment, and contribution to the team. Players who have moved on, even if they were once fan favorites, shouldn't dominate current narratives unless there is substantive reason tied to the present team. Nostalgia is natural, but it can become counterproductive when it clouds judgment or distracts from evaluating the current roster. Dak Prescott's achievements are clear and well documented, and the same applies to other players. Elevating past players unnecessarily or misrepresenting praise for the sake of engagement doesn't serve the fan base. It only complicates the conversation and creates confusion about who is truly being recognized. For what? Before we roll on, subscribe to Cowboys Wire News, drop a like, and turn on the bell. Your support keeps the Dallas Cowboys updates coming. Tell us what you think in the comments. Patrick Mahomes has sparked a wave of speculation after an unexpected remark about the Dallas Cowboys began circulating behind the scenes. According to whispers coming out of league insiders and locker room bystanders, the Kansas City superstar made a comment that left everyone around him raising their eyebrows and wondering whether something bigger is brewing. The chatter reportedly started during a casual conversation when Mahomes was asked about the current landscape of the league and which teams he keeps an eye on. Instead of the routine, polished response most players give, he allegedly paused, cracked a grin, and dropped a line that instantly turned into fuel for rumor mills everywhere. Those who heard it claim Mahomes said the Cowboys were far more interesting than people realize. A statement that set off immediate murmurs, not because it was necessarily bold, but because of the tone, one that hinted at something more than simple admiration from afar. Within moments, the room was buzzing. Some interpreted it as playful mischief, others as subtle praise, and a few even wondered whether Mahomes was hinting at a future showdown or a new rivalry that could electrify the league. His comment reportedly came with a level of confidence that made listeners question what exactly he knows or sees developing behind the curtain. Mahomes' words have since taken on a life of their own. Players from around the league are said to be joking about it, coaches are reportedly amused, and fans, especially those in Dallas, are dissecting every syllable like it was a cryptic message. Rumors have morphed into theories, ranging from strategic mind games to a simple offhand remark that landed harder than expected. What's clear is that Mahomes touched a nerve. Any mention of the Cowboys carries weight, but coming from one of the biggest stars in football, it becomes something else entirely, a spark turning into a wildfire of speculation. And until Mahomes addresses it directly, the league is left wondering what exactly he meant and whether the Cowboys should feel flattered or cautious. That's a wrap from Cowboys Wire News. For breaking Cowboys updates, subscribe, drop a like, and turn on the bell. Tell us your take in the comments.